Congratulations on tuning back into the next topic, which deals with problem solving around issues with your stakeholders and projects. Until this point, we've been focused on building the team dynamics and disrupting the traditional ideas or approaches in areas such as motivation, delegation and feedback. And whilst the first portion of this episode will deal specifically with the creation of self-awareness about your leadership styles and managing conflict, and how to respond to team challenges and difficult conversations, we'll then broaden this perspective for the remainder of the video to look at how to engage the stakeholders in problem-solving, critical thinking, and creative thinking constructs. It's a fascinating and incredibly insightful leg of the journey, as it's one of the basics areas practiced least often by our leaders. Therefore, we can't wait to share these ideas with you, as we know that the learnings and the subsequent outcome for you and your team are enormous. So please get comfortable, take a notebook in hand, and focus your energy as we step you through this topic called problem-solving situations. If you've followed the steps introduced in our previous 6 episodes, you will have greatly reduced the likelihood of dealing with the argumentative stakeholder, in particular those in your team. And if you recall, during topic 5, feedback strategies, you were introduced to a few models for successfully delivering that feedback. Tools such as FAST, BOOST, and SPI, which are among the more popular methods used today. So it's probably no real surprise as well that when you are the leader introducing change, be it a new process, system or tools, offering constructive feedback, or any number of other diverse situations, the recipients may not always be on the same page as you, nor agree with your opinion or your actions. The learning here is that this is a natural part of leadership, as everyone's an individual, and whilst they may for the most part be a loyal team player, a cooperative colleague, an understanding boss, or even a considerate client, they still hold unique personal values, beliefs and perspectives, which may not always align with the working environment, situation or discussion. Therefore, as a starting point in this episode, we want you to reflect first on your own conflict handling styles. This self-awareness of your style preference will greatly enhance your ability to handle different scenarios, i.e. if you choose to utilize it, of course, with different stakeholders more effectively and avoiding unintentional escalation of the matter. For this, we introduced a very popular tool called the Thomas Kuhlman model of conflict management. This model compares our level of assertiveness against our willingness to cooperate in a conflict situation and defines 5 conflict styles which we can and do adopt as a result. Starting with 2 extremes. First, through collaboration, which is a win-win outcome. And then at the other extreme, total avoidance of the issue, which is typically no one wins because there's no engagement. And then in between these 2 extremes, we have 3 other styles. Competing, where you're highly assertive with little willingness to cooperate at all. This tends to create a win-lose situation. And at the other end of that scale, accommodating, where you're highly cooperative, however normally at your own expense. This of course might be intentional, for an example where you want to preserve the relationship. And then in the middle of all those, the style called compromise. We see this often in the sales negotiation process, where there's typically give and take. But it can also be considered as a lose-lose situation, as neither party really achieves what they want. Depending on the stakeholder and the situation in the conflict, you may elect to use any of the 5 styles or even select a combination of more than one of these options. We'll go deeper into conflict management in our advanced series, but for now, we'll include several links to help you with your self-awareness and your understanding of how you can utilize the knowledge during future conflict situations. We would also encourage you to complete the questionnaire included in our episode blog on our site amentorscouch.com and practice this using the 5 styles. And now back to our reality that all leaders should expect this conflict scenario to present itself at some stage. It's important therefore to prepare ourselves by knowing our default style, to allow stakeholders to air their grievance, voice their concerns, and state their thoughts without you reacting inappropriately. To assist us in this regard, when conflict arises during team feedback sessions, it's also pleasing to know that we can predict with a degree of accuracy, based on some numerous studies in the field, the types of pushback to expect. Knowing this enables us to be somewhat prepared ahead of the communication. Typically, the recipient will express one or more of these 4 responses if they're being confronted about an issue. So, they may start by denying that the situation exists, in which case you need to be able to support your claim with facts and examples. They may try and trivialize the scale of the situation, stating that it's not really a big issue. In this situation, you support your claim with an outline of the impact and why it matters so. They may attempt to shift the blame onto others. Here you should allow the recipient to detail the situation as they see it and help them to dig into the causes. Try and identify that root cause. And finally, shifting blame onto a lack of personal knowledge or skill. Here you would explore together with that recipient which capability is missing, and if you find agreement, decide on what solution or what action should be taken together to resolve this issue. In the end, it's really important to reach agreement on the way forward with concrete actions, a nomination of the responsible person, and a clear timeline highlighted by milestones. The more you expose yourself to these challenges, the better you're likely to become in handling the situation and managing your style, provided of course that you utilize the tools provided and practice the communication methods already highlighted. Remember to be factual and base the feedback on your observations, not on hearsay. Park your emotions, allow time for input from the recipient, and work towards solutions. Don't get bogged down in the issue or the problems. Keep moving the discussion towards a solution. So you may be wondering, but what if we confront a more complex problem with a group or a larger team? This is surely going to require somewhat of a different approach. If so, yes, you're correct. So let's consider that your company is working on a large project and have encountered a significant problem which could jeopardize the completion date and the financial outcome. People are starting to get emotional, the atmosphere becomes heated, and the blame game is rampant. What can be done quickly to settle down the situation and move things towards a solution? Well, unfortunately, the common and probably the most obvious step would be to call a team meeting, paint the picture, and demand cohesion and effort to bring a turnaround. We see this approach used time and time again, and unfortunately with similar outcome. Most often, there's little change to the project's performance or end result. Thankfully, it's possible and relatively easy to disrupt this mentality by introducing a little logic and process to the equation. We kickstart this with our problem-solving mindset and later elaborate on the process with critical and creative thinking techniques. These steps are what we were referring to earlier when we said most managers fail to utilize the collective genius of the group and to identify and solve complex problems, fearing that the process might become too time-consuming. But in reality, more often than not, they simply don't know how or what to do. So let's unpack this approach in greater detail and understand more about each component and examine some of the supporting tools. And we start with the traditional problem-solving methodology. Starting with an understanding of this term problem-solving and the realization that many companies have developed their practices to incorporate one or more of the problem-solving methods as standards to their daily workplace activities. You can see the definition and a small sampling of 10 common problem-solving methods and tools on the screen. This problem-solving approach became very popular in the automotive industry around the quality topics during the 1980s and utilised many of these assessment tools. Since then, it's spread across most areas of business and is usually incorporated in a simplified methodology such as constructive or inductive reasoning techniques, or perhaps you're more familiar with PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. This is just a few examples. We'll place links to these and other methods in our blog as usual. To help you understand better, I'd like to introduce a simple but effective method for you to relate to the concept and how this problem-solving theory can be applied in your business practices with stakeholders and projects. The approach covers the principles adopted in the majority of methods, whilst utilising a simple 6-step model. Hence the reason I prefer this, particularly when working with groups that are not familiar with the traditional problem-solving techniques. Each of the 6 steps have a multiple of minor or smaller characteristics, which we adhere to or question during that stage. Plus, at the same time, we'll incorporate various tools or techniques for drilling deeper into the problem. So the process starts with step 1, defining the problem. In this step, we look to diagnose the situation so that we can focus on the problem and not just on the symptoms. For this stage, we introduce the end-to-end process review in the form of a flow diagram to ensure that we're clear about what is meant to happen along the entire activity. Next, in step 2, we need to determine the root cause or the causes, meaning that we need to identify what's causing us to wind up with this problem or situation. We use tools here such as cause and effect diagrams and the 5 why questioning technique to explore deeper into the linkages. In step 3, we need to define alternative solutions, typically using lateral thinking exercises such as brainstorming, and we try to identify all possible answers. Anything which may help solve the issue should be considered at this stage. Then in step 4, we select a solution or solutions. After grouping, prioritizing and considering all the possibilities before choosing the ones which you believe will resolve the matter. Now that the solution's been chosen, we're left with the task of implementing the change for step 5. This can be a simple or complex process and involve multiple sub-steps depending on the scale of the problem. And for the final step, step 6, we continue to monitor and evaluate the results after the implementation's been completed. We could of course stop here. This problem-solving approach alone will result in a high degree of success over most problems and resolve most disagreements. But of course, we want to make sure that you have a full knowledge, skill, and arsenal of tools. And therefore, we're going to incorporate applications of creative and critical thinking. These 2 separate elements are highly powerful as standalone topics and could have videos devoted to each separately. But in our case, we merely want to highlight their value add and show how to couple them together for greater problem-solving effect. Let's start by introducing creative thinking as a means of expanding the range of solutions, particularly during step 3 of our problem-solving exercise. This is the concept of thinking outside the box to generate innovative thoughts and ideas, moving from convergent to divergent ideas, looking for alternative solutions rather than only one correct outcome. To create the right situation for this creative thinking process to occur, you need to establish the right environment and combine the right ingredients, such as a diverse group of people with different roles, different backgrounds, different cultures, age, gender, expertise, and so on, as and where applicable. Please be sure to clearly define the game rules for this creativity exercise. With this in place, we can call on different creative thinking tools and techniques. Again, there's a considerable number to select from. Brainstorming, as we've already mentioned, mind mapping from Tony Buzan, 6 hats from Edward de Bono, and some less known approaches such as Scamper. All of these can even be supported by even more remote and abstract approaches from people such as Boulder Onerheim, with the use of continuous practice to train your mind to think creatively, the use of dream sleep to work on solving a stated problem, or even using randomness to trigger abstract connections to a problem. Whichever you select, the aim is to enhance the solution ideation. And then, of course, once we have these new untested thoughts, how can we assess them? Well, fortunately, that's our bridge into the next topic on critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Well, it can be defined in a number of ways, starting with it's a developed skill acquired through practice. It enables the ability to think clearly and rationally, to understand the logical connection between ideas. It refers to the ability to analyze information objectively and make reasoned judgment. Critical thinking involves the evaluation of sources such as data, facts, observable phenomenon, and research findings. Good critical thinkers can draw reasonable conclusions from the set of information and discriminate between useful and less useful details to solve a problem or make a decision. Critical thinkers rigorously question ideas and assumptions rather than accepting them at face value. So, if we now reflect back to our 6-step problem-solving process, we've already utilised creative thinking during step 3 to enhance and broaden our possible solution pool. Now in step 4, during the selection of the most effective solution, we can apply our critical thinking to challenge our rationale, based on the facts provided in steps 2 and 3. The outcome will be a concise, well thought through reasoning which sits behind the solution selection process. So there we have the complete process. We started with the simple feedback situations and encountering individual disagreement or resistance, learning about our own conflict management style, and then we broadened our perspective to more complex issues affecting larger projects and groups. And for these, we introduced a simple 6-step problem-solving methodology, which encapsulated both creative and critical thinking practices. And so I want to share with you here a highly effective example of addressing problems with the combination of all 3 elements, problem solving together with creative and critical thinking. It's through the use of a systems thinking model, referred to as a collaborative visualization approach. Addressing the problem through the systems model and the use of drawings on sticky notes or pads, and arranging them in sequence to expand on the end-to-end process flow, together with group collaboration, produces a visual frame of reference offering both clarity and alignment. This approach is excellently illustrated on Tom Wujcik's site called DrawToast and his wicked problem-solving toolkit. Having personally facilitated workshops where groups use this approach, I can vouch firsthand on its effectiveness. We'll include a link to the website and the TED Talk so you can gauge for yourself on the method's effectiveness. And so to conclude, as well as to introduce the next topic. With this topic closing, we've now provided you with a 3-part mini-series related to feedback, celebrating success, managing conflict and solving problems. Applying the learnings from these 3 videos alone will stand you apart from most leaders. Therefore, please do yourself a favour and review them again if there's anything you're unclear about. And remember to visit our site called amentorscouch.com to access each transcript, which contains all of the topics and related links. With only 3 videos remaining in the basic series, you've reached the business end of the proceedings. Up next, in topic 8, we deal with the necessity for change. I've got a little surprise lined up for you in this video, but you'll need to wait until we release it to see more. The final 2 topics cover pitching value-based strategies and running with your game plan. In these 3 episodes, we bring into scope self-awareness, which was recently cited in an MIT Slow Management Review article as the most important capability of any leader. And while self-awareness, similar to communication, has always been a foundational part of this program, it will start to become a more visible component in our discussions as we turn our attention towards you more so than the team or other stakeholders. I can't wait to bring the change story to you, but until then, please stay safe and be careful driving. Cheers for now.